Yeah, there we go. All right, excellent. All right, so let's call this meeting to order. May we have the roll call, please?
Committee Member Carlton?
Present.
Committee Member Green is absent. Committee Member Hanson Romero not here yet. Committee Member Moss?
Present.
Committee Member Shrestha?
Here.
And Chair Abbott?
Hit the wrong button there. I am here. Very good. All right. So let me read this statement with which we open each meeting. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right, very good. First item is the approval of the minutes. Hope everybody saw the radically adjusted minutes.
I'll move that.
Very good.
I'll second.
All right, Member Carlton, thank you. Let's have a vote, please.
Committee Member Carlton?
Approved.
Committee Member Moss?
Yes.
Committee Member Shrestha?
This is abstain from the last minute's meeting, right? Last meeting?
You were the last one. You can vote on this one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to say approve or abstain?
Abstain.
Oh, okay. And then Chair Abbott?
Approve.
So we only have 3 votes out of, so we'll have to come back to that one once
yes.
Committee Member Hanson Romero.
Very good. Understood.
Back.
Understood. Very good.
And oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Announcements.
So Vice Chair, EDC member Michael Petrilli has resigned from the EDC due to scheduling issues. So just wanted to let everyone know he will be missed. He offered great insight to these meetings. I also wanted to make the announcement that Foodieland will be occurring in Albany again this year at Golden Gate Fields. The event will take place from 1 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. every day it is in operation, which at this point the event dates are August 5th to 7th, August 12th to 14th, and October 7 to 9. And also, this just came out today. Alameda County will require masking in most indoor public settings beginning tomorrow. A press release was posted today by the Alameda County Public Health Department, and you can find out more at covid-19.acgov.org/press. And last one is the submission window for COVID Small Business Assistance Grant applications has closed, and applications are currently being reviewed.
Excellent. And I'll just be curious, will we receive some sort of report on those applications or that process eventually? I'm just curious.
I'll have to look into that to see, but I mean, certainly you'll be
not
updated.
Necessary. Yeah,
okay.
Not necessary. I mean, I'll be curious. That's all.
Okay.
All right. I do have an announcement just inviting everybody to a ribbon cutting and grand opening celebration. This is for Carbon Health, which is, I guess, is open or is opening soon on 1800 Monroe. That's across the street from Sprouts near University Village. It's 5:30 next Thursday, a week from tonight. 5:30, so just about now in a week. It should be a good time, and we're happy. They're an urgent care and primary care medical office. And I guess that's it. Yeah, the other thing is in July. We'll wait till July. Great, thanks. Any other announcements? Not seeing any. We can then go to, we skipped public comment, didn't we? Oh man, all right, we'll open it up, public comment. So this, I see we do have 3 attendees. This is for any member of the public who wants to talk about something that's not an item on the agenda. There's an opportunity to let us know of things you're concerned about that we might want to consider in a future meeting. So please, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Seeing no hands, and now seeing Member Hanson Romero, we will close public comment and return to approving the minutes. Member Hans Romero, you had a chance to review the minutes? Or are you prepared to vote on the minutes? And you are muted, just in case you thought we could hear you, we couldn't. So just.
Sorry about that. No, actually, I have not had an opportunity to do that.
And is it possible to throw those up on the screen real quick?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just one moment.
There's not a lot to them, so it won't take long. These are action minutes, of course.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So let me just actually, I'm going to do full screen mode. Oops, did I? Oh, can you see that now? That's the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Should I read through them or anything? Or
No.
Okay.
No. That's fine. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's that part?
So do we need another motion and everything? I assume we do.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Member Moss, would you do the honors?
Absolutely. I move approval.
I'll second. Oh.
I have a motion and a second. Can we have a vote, please?
Committee member Carlton,
Approved.
committee member Hanson Romero,
Approved.
committee member Moss,
Yes.
committee member Shrestha,
Abstain.
and then committee member Abbott.
It's approved. Very good. All right. So now moving on to item 6.1. I believe we can go ahead and discuss this now.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe member Shrestha, I'm so sorry, will be recused on this one. But we'll get started with the presentation.
Okay, so I'll move you into the attendees, member Shrestha, and then I'll move you back in afterwards. And then staff member Justin Freed is here for the presentation.
And just jump in real quick and reminding member Shrestha that she's welcome to comment as a member of the public during this process.
Thank you, committee members, for having me back for a second round here. I plan to just briefly go through the changes from the guidelines that were presented last month and open it up for any questions and discussion you have. So a brief refresher, the temporary outdoor dining program began almost 2 years ago now. We currently have 15 installations along Solano Avenue between San Pablo and Ordway. We began discussing a revised program in the winter, given the duration of COVID impacts and interest in continuing in-street installations. The draft guidelines separate out the requirements by section. I'll go through the major changes proposed from last month's draft, including new sections on insurance, signage, and acceptable use. So a few changes on the parklet location and setback section. There's a proposed addition of a limit to 2 parking spaces used when reaching 40% of the vehicle parking spaces on the block. And this is in response to feedback concerning impacts on adjacent businesses. Some comments were weighing more towards a hard cap per block, like 50%. Others felt concentrated installations made a block a destination. So we thought this proposal of scaling down to a 2 max balances those different considerations we heard. I'll note that Transportation Commission recommendation that we received last week did remove this change. They indicated that the staff discretion for allowing 3 spaces provided staff the ability to already limit an installation to 2. So their recommendation removed this change. In response to other comments, guidelines now specify a need to relocate loading and short-term vehicle spaces and detail bus service considerations in this section. The guidelines also propose to adjust the setbacks, reducing from 2 feet to 1 feet setback from the adjacent travel lane and increasing from 1 foot to 2 feet for the driver's side adjacent parking space. On the section around perimeter barriers, in response to some of the questions and clarifications requested during discussion, there's more detail in this section, including on the wall or railing and barrier requirements and the intent of these elements. The wheel stop requirement for angled parking spaces has been removed, and a requirement for a flexible bollard or delineator post at the corners has been added. We still didn't detail more heavier substantial barrier, but we'll probably delve into that in greater detail in the application or working through with applicants. I think we discussed a little bit last month, an example from San Francisco that really looked at force on particular locations across the barrier. One other case that we found that got into a little more specifics on this was in Walnut Creek, which required 250 pounds or more of weight at least every 6 feet. And then they detailed what that meant in terms of soil equivalent or gravel or cement blocks kind of thing. So there, we found one other example that got into a little more level of detail on what a substantial barrier should look like to refer to. On the platform section, we did remove the requirement and added that a ramp down could be sufficient. And then we added the drainage reference to also include reference to drainage around a ramp if that was the accommodation there. For the accessibility section, we did make some minor changes. I think on the platform section, we specified that if it's not a platform, the applicant has to be able to show that they are meeting accessibility requirements. Fire, really the only change there was adding some detail on electrical lighting. The maintenance section added that movable furniture should be secured when not in use. For the fees and public access, we combined these two sections and changed from the 2 fee types that was in the earlier version to 1 fee with a proportional reduction for providing space for the general public. Whether that would be a public table or public bench that's generally accessible and signed that way, or a bus stop parklet kind of installation where it's serving bus needs and bus patron needs. The one other change from the Transportation Commission recommendation, and their recommendation was adding a little more detail on how we would calculate that proportional reduction to give guidance on that. We also, with that change, really are keeping the bus stop parklets as its own thing. It could be part of this in-street installation parklet, but because this is an up to 3 year and more temporary materials, whereas the parklets are more of a permanent installation, keeping them as a separate process, we decided made sense. I think that was the main changes there. And then we did add new sections on the related insurance requirements, on limiting signage, and on acceptable use with references to the relevant regulations or agencies responsible for outdoor noise, alcohol sales, health, and smoking, and a general reference to public nuisance. And then in the removal section, we clarify the arrangements with the city allow for flexibility on the time limits related to removal, and added some detail on the causes for installation to be subject to removal and the revocation of permit. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions on these changes or go into more detail. We're seeking committee recommendation, so we would bring this program with the recommendations from Transportation Commission and this committee to City Council for approval, and then would work to prepare final application and guideline documents to roll out the program. And with that, our recommendation is that the committee recommend to the council adoption of the proposed Parklet program guidelines. And I'll open it up for questions.
All right, so first off, any questions from the committee members, perhaps on the changes or the original version? Not seeing any questions. All right, we'll move then to public comment. We'll open it up. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on this item. If you have something to say, please raise your hand. And not seeing a hand, so we'll bring it on back here. All right, so now we are open for discussion on the committee from the committee members on this item. Who'd like to start? I see Member Moss, please.
Thank you, Todd. I did not attend that last month's meeting. At the time that meeting took place, it was 2 a.m. where I was. So it would have been challenging. But I reviewed the video, and I thought it was a great meeting. I thought lots of stuff was covered, and you know, you guys did well as far as I could see. There, I wrote down a bunch of notes because my brain may not be as together as it should be, just coming off the. I think there was something that was mentioned, but doesn't appear in the final report. And it had been mentioned both in the survey in terms of public and business responses. And it was mentioned, I think Todd referred to it, and Peter Goodman also commented. And this is the idea that, you know, if these are going to be permanent, we may want to think of some kind of design review. Between the ADA requirements, the UBC, the fire code, health department, traffic code, etc., pretty much there's kind of a set number of standards we're going to have to follow in allowing these. And I think we'll do that. But the pandemic is slowing down, although it didn't slow down for me this week. But and so I think that the need for, getting this done quickly and allowing restaurants to, set up these parklets, the urgency may not be there quite as much as it was in 2020 when we first, this was first considered. And if we're going to consider having some kind of design standards, it would be better to at least refer to those now, even though we don't know what those are, than just kind of pass this and then we start seeing things that may not be that great. When I walk up and down the street, again, to kind of review where parklets were at when I got back, some of them were really nice and some of them look terrible. If your idea of a parklet is just some plywood painted white with a couple of ballards against it, it doesn't do much for the streetscape. And I think it should be important, particularly to this committee, that we want to have the nicest kind of business scene possible as we go forward. There's lots of questions here. Who would do a review? Could be done by staff. It could be done by planning and zoning, or it could be done by this committee, for that matter, as these applications apply. And then, how you set those standards and what the standards are, whether they involve adding plants or different kinds of lighting. It's something that would need to be discussed and figured out. But, like I say, I think it would be easier to at least get that rolling now before we adopt these standards, which are all great for safety considerations, but not necessarily that we're going to end up with stuff that looks great. Perhaps maybe just a little line saying the council or the city reserves the ability to set design standards in the future might be a good thing. And so not let anybody, start building away and we realize that these things don't look all that great. So that was my 2 cents on it and my reaction to it. I'm curious to see if anyone else thought about that.
All right. Did anybody else think about that?
Hi, yes, I totally agree with everything that you just said. So yeah. I definitely need some sort of design review, I think. Was there not any, I thought I saw an area where maybe it was in there, but maybe it wasn't just detailed out very well.
That was my recollection as well, is that we did discuss some sort of design review. Mm-hmm. But I was just looking through it and I don't see it in there either. So maybe I'm misremembering.
I think that just some references made in the document and perhaps what Justin was just saying kind of implies that they have in mind kind of a non-official design review is kind of what I'm getting. But I think there's something to be said for making it a little more formal, or at least stated that apart from all these check boxes, it's got to be this, 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 this. We're going to be considering aesthetics as well, and it needs to. We reserve the right to make that a consideration. Is that kind of what you have in mind, Member Moss?
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, I think if we're talking about long-term parklets, then those long-term parklets should be something that really enhances the streetscape. And, if you start thinking about what you could do with lighting, with plants and other things, it would be a great plus for Solano Avenue.
Yeah, very good. Member Carlton.
Yeah, I think that you have to put something in there because, what's a good design is, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I think if you don't formally put something in there to say that we, reserve the right and some sort of, aesthetic review, who's to say for the business owner to say, well, I don't have to do that and refer back to the plan to say, I don't have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do design review on every project, permanent project that comes before the city. So we certainly have, precedents for, doing something like this.
All right. Thank you. Any additional comments? Did you have anything else you wanted to mention, Member Moss?
No, I think that's going to be about as much as I can.
So you've got the energy for it or not. I understand.
Yeah,
Any other comments? Member Hans-Romero.
I just, one other comment, I guess it's more of a question that just popped into my head. Has the health department been contacted about this, and do they have any recommendations or requests or requirements for this as well?
They've reviewed the temporary installations. I have not provided them the draft guidelines for their comment.
Okay, because per my understanding, I think that there was, some additional items that the health department, Alameda County, would like to have some say in it or some discussion about it. I think that they went ahead and they inspected what they had and made it work. but I believe that they were hoping to be, part of the discussion as well.
Member Carlton, please.
Just to clarify, Member Hanson Romero, are you talking about the initial Parklet design or setup if it meets the health department standards? Because I know that restaurants are periodically, inspected by the health department. So would this be above and beyond, like before they could open? But even then, I know that the health department does do a review of food service establishments.
Correct. And when I had spoken to one of the health department inspectors, he was hoping to be involved a little bit more in what if they were going to turn into a more permanent fixture. I believe he was interested in getting some more details and just making sure everything was good with them as well.
Member Moss.
Yeah, I would think that if the health department just has some standards that might be applicable to these parklets, hard surfaces, stuff that was cleanable, etc. That might be something we would apply in a package or supply in a package when applications come in, that you need to be able to clean the tables and sweep the floors in some way or whatever.
All right. Additional discussion? I have a few points that I was going to bring up, just small things. First off, I want to say something that I failed to say at the last meeting, and that is that I really appreciate staff's effort on this. I think they did a great job with the initial draft, and I think they've done a fabulous job incorporating our comments. I really want to express my appreciation for that. I did have a few little things I wanted to bring up. I was a little concerned about the sentence on lighting. Lighting is encouraged. Electrical lighting and appliances must be outdoor rated and plugged into a GFI outlet. Well, if it's battery powered or solar powered, a GFI outlet's not really appropriate. And then how do they get the power to the parklet? I think that should be clarified a little bit. Are they allowed to just plug it into the light post? Parts of Solano Avenue have power in the light posts. Or do they need to bring it from the building? And if so, how do they bring it? Does it have to be a certain height, or does it have to be covered in a permanent way or semi-permanent? I would like a little more clarity there. And it might just be something like, they must meet current standards for semi-permanent electrical installation, something like that. It just doesn't have to be spelled out, just a reference. I found one little interesting thing in the public access part, and this is probably just, just needs to be clarified a little bit. Approved signage is required for public access, and yet down in signage is prohibited. So clearly, I think on the signage section, we're saying signage is prohibited. You mean advertising signage, branding signage, not necessarily, bus your own table, please, or be sure and use the compost, something like that, or watch your step. Right? That would be a sign. So maybe soften the signage or clarify the signage sentence a little bit. I don't think you're trying to prevent people from posting, watch your step, but thought I should mention that. And I'm still, I guess if I do like the idea, I very much like the idea of some sort of design review, partly because I'm still bothered by the squishiness of this term, other substantial barrier. Somebody's idea of substantial might be different than ours, and without going to the lengths of, say, what Walnut Creek was suggesting, without something more here, they could say, well, this is substantial. And what is their basis for saying, you're saying it's not substantial, I say it is substantial, and they, who knows? So I just think it bears clarification, even if it is simply the design review step process where that would emerge. And finally, I understand what we're trying to do with the 40%. If parklets are taking up over 40% of their 40% or more of the in that block, that you can have no more than two. I mean, that could still be 100%. I mean, that could still be 80%. If it's over 40 and everybody has 2, well, if you have 5 restaurants, you're going to have 10 spaces. Now, practically, is that going to happen? I don't think so. But I just at least want to kind of, keep that in mind that without some sort of certain limit to the percentage of spaces that can be used, it can be exceeded, and there might be challenges. But again, the way things are kind of playing out now, I don't see that being an issue. And I think that's it. Any other further discussion, comments? I would mention that I do see a hand up in the public, and perhaps we'll open for public comment again real quickly, just because they may have missed their opportunity. Any objection to that at this point?
No.
No. Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll open it back up to public comment. So please let in the speaker who has their hand up. All right, you're on. You may speak. Unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Yes,
thank you very much for thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this item. I raised my hand late only because the issue of design review came up, which hadn't come up in the staff report, and it's a very interesting idea. I had to be careful that the design review can be used as a way to block projects, and in fact, this is why state laws about bigger projects are calling for objective design standards these days, standards that can be applied objectively that aren't discretionary design review. So those might be considered if you are applying a design review standards here. And then it's also a lot easier to judge a project against objective standards rather than have a subjective hearing about each project. But also very good comments from all the commissioners about this item. Thank you.
All right, I recognize the voice of Mr. Pilch. Thank you for your comment, and we can come back and see if there's any additional comment on this. I think the point is well taken that design review kind of implies some sort of standard that it's being matched against, which I think is probably what staff had in mind when they were kind of making it kind of casual, that they'll know whether it flies or not. But what do we do here? What can be required? Or, I mean, short of saying parklets must look like this, you have 4 options. It's A, B, or C. What else can we do here? Member Mosh, you've been on planning and zoning. Any suggestions?
Oh, well, I'm not sure I entirely know, but I think at least somewhere in this resolution there should be a reference to some kind of design review. If Nick doesn't like that term, that's fine. But I think we got to have some standards, and that that if we're going to pass this fairly quickly, it'd be nice to put something in there saying those standards will be worked out in a future meeting or whatever, and maybe that's planning and zoning that works those out, or maybe it's this committee or the arts committee or whoever. But I don't think that necessarily excludes or stops anything. I mean, I personally am very excited about parklets. I think it's a great idea. And I personally would have no problem if 100% of the parking went away on Solano Avenue, as well as the rest of the cars. But, I have a radical perspective on that, perhaps. I hate to hold things up, but maybe if we have to have another meeting to say, we're going to have something that refers to future standards, which are yet to come, something like that. I'd be, curious what Justin thought about this, or Brennan, in terms of staff input on how to work this.
Yeah, I would draw a distinction, I think, between what Chair Abbott referred to as the squishiness of the substantial barrier, something to that effect that's sort of clarification on what we've spelled out. We've outlined at the start of the guidelines that we have the, I think, capability, if we don't feel comfortable, staff can decide based on these guidelines, and there's a question on the intent or clarification that we are in disagreement with an applicant on, we could elevate to economic development if it was sort of within your expertise, or Transportation Commission, it was more on the safety side, or both, if it was something that you both had weighed in on. I think that's what we've built in here, as if there's question, like if we need to get into more clarification on what the substantial barriers, that kind of thing. I think if you're talking aesthetics, that's not something we've spelled out. You're starting to talk about which materials we want, this kind of thing. And that I do think would need either an advisory body or a document developed that's not this, if we were going to do that kind of materials aesthetic design review. So I think if you wanted to recommend that, that's something new that would need to be developed either by a committee or by us hiring someone to put that together. I think that is distinct from what the guidelines currently are. I agree with you on that. And would need probably an advisory body, either this one or planning and zoning. I don't to be that, unless it was very prescriptive on sort of a staff yes or no, you're meeting these material requirements or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, staff does a lot of stuff over the counter on all sorts of things. So, how specific it needs to be. But my thought is to at least have a reference in whatever we're sending up to council, saying, we hold the right to set up some kind of design standards or something like that in the future if we can't do it now. And I agree that you go down this path, it's a bit of a wormhole. But on the other hand, if these are long term, we want them to look great.
A question I have is how is business signage handled now? Is that reviewed? Are there standards and aesthetic? Is it judged for it can't be bright pink or day glow yellow or something, or is that just it has to meet certain requirements and it's done?
I apologize. I gave Jeff the evening off since he had a long evening last night. He's the one that could probably better answer that. We do have sign requirements in the planning and zoning sort of world. I'm not familiar with sort of where I think there's a lot of limitations on the content of signage for sure. I think if it's a large enough development, you can set up like a sign sort of program kind of level of design guidance, but I'm not sure how much beyond that we can get into other than size and sort of scale or number.
I was just curious if it would parallel, if there's some sort of kind of second tier other than a full planning and zoning review sort of process. Yeah. I mean, would it be possible to have language that is kind of gestures to, needs to look professional, needs to look polished or something, needs to look, some way we can get some leeway in there without having to specify, must look like this, this, or this, or made out of this, but some way to short of that, that still gives us a little leverage to say, look, you're not meeting the standard because this looks like it fell out of the back of a truck. It's functional, it checks all the boxes, but it just reflects badly on the avenue. I mean, basically, that's what we're concerned by. We may not be able to do that. One person's looks bad on the avenue is another person's, this is exactly what I've always dreamed of. So again, we run into the possible situation of it being excluding people, likely from a different background, different cultural background, and that would be an issue. So maybe that's not where we want to go, but I'm getting a sense we want something. We want some lever we have that can have some sort of control or say at least and how things look. Any of your thoughts, folks? Any input?
And is this really discussing about the aesthetics of the wall railing sort of perimeter, in which case maybe it is clarifying more in detail what that substantial barrier can look like, or being more prescriptive? Or are there other elements? I guess having an understanding of what the aesthetic considerations are would probably help me understand if adding a little detail on one or two sections of this addresses your concern, or if you're really talking about a much bigger sort of review of the materials and aesthetics.
I mean, for my part, I'm thinking the overall look, the overall impression, not just the barrier, but the whole package. You know, you drive down or walk down or bike down the avenue, and some of them are quite eye-catching. They're wonderful, and they make you want to go there. They make you want to be there. And other ones, it's like, well, that doesn't look so great. That looks like it was just slapped together, and doesn't look like they're serious, and it kind of reflects badly on the others.
You know, one thing that's sort of beyond barriers is lighting. If these things, you know, they should all have some kind of lighting or reflectors or something that at night they can be seen by drivers, obviously. But if they're going to be used primarily at night and there's going to be people in there, there should be some kind of lighting requirement, you know, twinkle lights, or, you know, it could be, you know, it could all be done on 12 volt, frankly. But so it, you know, barriers is part of it, but also lighting, you know, if you can add some plants, something like that. You know, I'm curious, Jennifer, you probably have staged a few places in your day. And, you know, I'm sure there's some tricks in that realm that you could apply.
Yeah, so I mean, I hire a stager usually to do my my staging, but yeah, I mean, like I know that even in our building, like for houses and stuff, Albany has requirements as far as, like, you know, types of windows that are, you know, allowed or not allowed to be used in front facing areas. I mean, you guys get pretty detailed in some of the building permits and aesthetics. So it should have some sort of a, you know, some sort of a, items, and maybe that I just don't know what details to specifically include, but maybe if you can go and speak to some of the other elements that are looked at just in use of required design for houses or buildings, and maybe there's some language in there that you can take and apply to this as well. But I don't know really specifically what we could say would be allowed or not allowed.
So Member Moss, in your initial comment, you had some kind of a gesture language that you know, we reserve the right to, or it may be necessary to. Do you remember what you said there? I remember liking that.
Well, I just thought that if we added some line that the city reserves the right to attach design review, you know, in a later date, you know, that we're doing this now to keep restaurants busy and happening, but within a year's time or whatever, there may be other standards that will come down. You know, that would be it seems to me the easy out. I mean, we may never do it, but you know, that could start a discussion. And you know, you know, I'm on the committee, the one-man committee to you know, go after to talk with other commissions, committees, and you know, I'd be happy to go up for you know, public comment on planning and zoning, the arts committee, you know, whatever. And suggests that this is something we might want to do.
Do we avoid some problems if we don't say reserve the right to, add some sort of design review and say some level of design standards rather than the review? Review implies a process, and I think it has a whole lot behind it.
Yeah.
Standards is a little more vague, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about. That if it becomes an issue, we need to be able to introduce some standards that would then need to be followed. I'm kind of comfortable with that sort of sentiment or that sort of thought.
Yeah, I think this is probably a question for somebody like Jeff Bond, because you're sort of dancing around planning and zoning regulations here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's probably a whole lot more behind this than we really remember. Carlton, I see your hand.
I was just going to say I agree about saying something about a standard. We reserve the right to lay out some standards, because to say that it's a review implies that we already have a standard or a guideline in place, which we don't. To me.
Here, member hands remote.
In speaking on this stuff, it also brings to mind, did we have something in there over enforcement of, say somebody goes and puts something together and then they start adding to it or doing other things that maybe are not so great? And is there some sort of a code enforcement? Are they going to be inspected on a regular basis, or, that kind of thing? Just so that we can make sure that whatever we put out there is actually being followed,
Yeah, I think partly what you're asking is a city process question. Is that, are we going to do this? The guidelines are here. Are we going to be sure people follow them? But I wonder if it's too much to add a line here saying, installations will be reviewed twice a year or quarterly or something like that. Which on the one hand kind of commits the city to doing something, which they may not feel they have the resources to do, which is my concern. But I think also kind of lays it out that you need to follow these standards. We're taking this seriously, and you need to follow these standards. I think that's mostly a resource question. I'm sorry, Member Carlton.
I was going to say that I think that there's a little bit of a fine line there, because I think you do need to put it out there that it's like, this will be reviewed. You can't just, put it out and then you're free to go once we do that. But to me, if I was doing one of these installations and you said, well, we're going to review it every quarter, I'm like, well, you could change your mind every quarter, and that's just not worth it to me.
Yeah, I think it's not that sort of thing. It's review to be sure you're still meeting the standards you started when we approved it. That's things haven't slipped, and it's being maintained, it's being cleaned, that sort of thing. Rather than now we're going to impose these design standards. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. No, go ahead, please.
Do you put in something that just says, a line somehow in this thing that, that the parklet must be maintained to a level of, to the level of which it was originally designed, or something like that, just so that you can keep it from crumbling down?
That is there. I think we're just trying to, frankly, between you and me and Brennan and Justin, cover your ears. I'm trying to commit the city to following up on this a little bit. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here. And I know they're resource starved, and I certainly understand that, but maybe they can figure out how much they are able to do. Maybe it's just once a year, maybe it's twice a year, but
or if something gets reported, like say, for example, all of a sudden somebody's encroaching a little bit too far into the next parking space, or, that they added a feature or something in there that's now collecting rainwater and causing mosquito larvae, or, that kind of thing. So just something that there is somebody who's going to be following up on whatever it is that's put out there, because without the follow-up and follow through, it doesn't really, people will do extra all the time.
We could deputize the blue glove crew to.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you have. All right, Justin, have we given you enough? Probably more than. Any questions or clarifications you'd like to make?
Well, so we're looking for a recommendation to council on the guidelines. Some of what you've discussed, you've talked about adding to the guidelines, or it sounds like some of this, in my mind, would be additional recommendations to council for us to consider, or them to consider delegating a committee or commission to develop design guidelines or aesthetic guidelines. It sounds like there's a programmatic recommendation regarding regular inspections, those kind of things. So I think these are questions if you wanted to recommend those to council, we would be bringing those questions to council in conjunction to the guidelines, or if you want us to, bring you back a new draft with some of this folded in for you to discuss at a future meeting and try to have it within this guidelines document. That I've heard a little bit of both. So I see both of those as potential actions or options for you to move forward.
So just clarification, if we're going to approve something to pass on to council, do we need to get the language locked down right here and now, or can we say with these comments?
If you give me language that you want added, that would be, I think, a recommendation to council. If sounds like some of these comments are things that beg more discussion. So I think it's either asking us to bring this back to you to discuss those and have suggested language on those, or to bring those as your recommendation that those be additional items developed with the program in addition to these guidelines.
Great. Okay. So, I mean, by my sense, do you feel like there's a real deadline on this? I mean, it doesn't really take effect for, another half a year, or you're probably just ready to get off your plate. I can tell by the look on your face, but is it going to be, some horrible delay if we end up this having to come back another month? I see Member Hanson Ramirez's hand.
I want to be cognizant of the fact that everybody kind of disappears in August.
It's all dark. We don't.
I'd like to. I personally would like to go forward with saying, that we would, move to bring this to council, but adding, these additional suggestions, or and let them kick it around. I feel like we've discussed a lot of. We've pretty much got through with what I think we all see as needing to be added. So with these additional, how'd you say it, Justin? I'm so sorry.
If you're going with recommending these guidelines with, I think there were a couple additions or specific tweaks considered. The addition would be recommendation that council consider development of aesthetic or design standards in conjunction with this. Recommend that council consider,
follow up and
including in the program allocation of staff time or resources towards, yearly or twice a year, quarterly, whatever your recommendation was on inspection or review of them, or complaint driven as you identified. But I think those could be programmatic recommendations to council in conjunction with the guidelines document. In terms of,
my sense at this point is we've kind of backed away from the idea of requesting a specific design standard at this point, but just leave it open for, making reference to it here so that it's open for the future. That if it becomes an issue, then we would, that door is open. I'm not sure how that works with city policy, but that would be I think that's my sense. So we're not planning to ask council right now with this vote to say, please begin this process. We're just saying, let's kind of add some language here so that's an option in the future.
So just to restate, one statement that was made that could be a potential was reserve the right to attach design standards at a later date. So that's something that could be specifically stated in the recommendation.
Right. I like that. And that would go,
Oh.
I'm not sure where it would go, but perhaps under perimeter barriers, or maybe under the introduction. I'm not sure, but so I don't think I'm in a situation.
Perhaps they could have a, I mean, perhaps when they file for this, that there would be some sort of a drawing or something that they would have to bring that would be approved in the application process. I don't want to change stuff up on people. Like if all of a sudden somebody applies and they buy materials and they do all this other stuff, and then all of a sudden subject later to a design review, I don't want to see that happen. But I think that, you know, as with anything, if you're going to do a remodel or something like that, that they would have to come with drawings in hand, plans or something that could get reviewed in the initial application.
Does the application require a sketch or something? It seems like the ones I saw had just vague sketches. Is that correct?
We haven't prepared the application documents, but the needing to meet accessibility requirements, some of the additional detail here needed, I think they're essentially going to need some pretty detailed plan drawings. If with the platform, there's structure, that kind of stuff that they're going to be needing to present to us.
Okay. Master Mayor, I think you muted myself.
Sorry. Because it would also, you know, structurally need to be sound. So there's, you know, it's not necessarily about how pretty it looks, but also that it's functioning and solid and constructed properly as well. So. Especially like when you have a roof that you're putting over things, you want to make sure that the beams are the adequate size, you know, to hold the weight. Things don't get blown off. You know, if, you know, a type of roof material is bad, maybe it could cause, in a heavy windstorm, cause it to shift or something. So I feel like there needs to be some sort of a building standard, so to speak.
And I think that's referenced. Is something like that referenced in the existing, at least?
Under the fire, it's canopies, roofs, and heaters are subject to fire department approval.
Right, roofs must be metal. Okay.
That's not actually structural.
Yeah, that's not quite the same.
You've also added insurance requirements. So to some degree, insurance companies will be taking some of this on. I mean, if an insurance company comes out and says this is going to blow away in the next big storm, they probably won't be able to get that insurance.
From my understanding, a lot of them, some of the insurance, it's just like, oh no, you're cleared to go. So they're not actually sending out in insurance inspection requests. So
well, the insurance companies have to take some liability. They, you know, that's, you know, too bad for the insurance companies if you know, if these things do start falling apart.
So I do know that when some of the structures were getting roofs, a year ago or whenever that was, some of them were not being very well built. And I know that Jeff did go out and did have the ability to say this isn't meeting our standards. So I think that standard exists. So I think it's just maybe referenced it here, maybe not, but depends on how much detail. I think that's the sort of thing that would be communicated over the desk or over the counter when people come in with the application. So maybe need to reference it here. I'm not sure. I'm afraid I'm not prepared with new language for the particular specific items I pointed out. So I think we're going to have it come back. I hate to do that, but I'm not sure we're in a position to just kind of go forward with it tonight. Any disagreement from the committee?
I agree with you. I mean, these are long-term parklets, so whatever goes forward, we may have for a very long time, and might as well try to get it as right as we can.
Agreed. Okay. All right. Member Carlton, please.
Yeah, I agree that we're not quite ready yet. But as I was looking about that, I think we keep kind of talking about design and where does it fit in, and maybe design is just its whole own little slide where it meets, some sort of something, and then there's a disclaimer at the bottom that we still reserve the right, and maybe it's just a whole separate new slide.
And I think there should be language. If we do say reserve the right for design review, it's not retroactive, right? It's only new things. We're not going to go back and say you no longer meet our standards. You have to come up to it. But I think that's going to be a different discussion. So I think we're prepared to close this item. Any final comments, folks, before we close this item?
Just for my own clarity, so the things that will come back are design review or some concept of associated to it, or either design standards or design review, and then also some mechanism for enforcement, at least in proposed in.
Right. Yeah, at least some reference to, and again, this document may not be the place for that. So maybe, I think, Justin, maybe suggested, that's kind of a different proposal. But then specifically for this document, there are the questions and comments I had about lighting standard, how the power gets out there, referencing batteries as opposed to just a GFI outlet. I thought some clarification over what counts as signage would be appropriate, just because I think the way it is here is just a little confusing.
And I'd also like to see that the health department gets contacted before this comes back to us, just to be sure that any of their comments or feedback might be included as well.
So the document references health department standards, but I think when Member Hanson Romero is saying is that they might like to have a little input on this document itself, on the guidelines, might avoid some issues further down the road. That's kind of
correct.
Just to be clear, so the lighting comments I think are detailed enough that I could incorporate that. If the design review comments you're wanting in there are really just reserving the right for that to be updated, I don't see a lot for an additional discussion. So maybe you guys are there. I don't know. I'm not trying to steer you, but I think the lighting comments you gave are specific, and the signage reference to just being clear on that. If you are just talking about language to, express an interest in the design standards or ability to add those over the 3-year period of what we're anticipating the initial program to be, those are all clear to me. I could take a recommendation, I think, to move your guidelines with those changes. I'm happy to come back next month for further discussion, but I'm not sure what that discussion is, I guess, at this point.
And I would say design and structural.
Yeah.
So we can definitely reference building right. If roof we only talked about in fire, we can say, structures are subject to building code standards and will be reviewed as such. That one's clear as well. And we can definitely review with county health before we take it to council and see if they have any additional feedback.
I mean, I'm satisfied with that.
I'm satisfied with that.
If you with those notes, we would approve it, and then you could. I have confidence in you. I'm pretty sure you'll capture the suggestion. Member Moss.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hate to be picky, but it seems to me I'd rather vote on something that I see written up than something that may come back when, I don't know what other pressing issues we have for the committee next month, but it's important to get the details right.
Okay. All right. No, I that persuades me. I think it's worth just holding off one more month. Sorry. we can, hopefully it's not too demanding and we can just take care of it next month pretty quickly.
So if we take care of it next month, when would it go to council then is my question, because then again, August is, we're in June and July, and then August, everybody's off. And then you're coming back to October.
Actually,
And
September comes before October,
well,
yes.
yeah, but I mean, it's,
Yeah, I don't think they're in control of the council schedule, but it would
well, I'm just curious, like how our meetings line up. Would they be meeting about it then roughly right after our meeting, or?
It would likely be September. Just looking at the calendar.
Because also we're then, putting this out to the district and these changes will need to be made by the end of this year. I'm just trying to look at the timeline moving forward, and for everybody's planning purposes.
Is there, is there an expiration date on the current parklets?
No, not how we wrote it. I think we did write it with reference to public health orders. So there may be, if there's no sort of health restrictions kind of thing, we may have a little more tenuous justification for keeping the permits that are out there now. But there wasn't an explicit expiration on them.
And I think that if this is approved in September, I think that's adequate time, October, November, December, for businesses to be made aware that, any that aren't going to meet this will need to be removed by the end of the year. Right? That's the only thing that's at play here, right? Is they need to meet the standard by the end of the year. Or I guess the start of the next year. I see we've lost member Hans Romero temporarily, but
so is that correct that they have to, if they don't meet the standards by the end of the year, then they have to move it, or?
That's the schedule we proposed. That could change if we needed it to change.
Like if this doesn't get approved until September, October, then that could move back to say you must be in compliance before February, maybe. Is that a possibility?
That could push out the time frame that we give them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm going to close this item unless there's any final objections, and we'll move on. Not seeing any. All right. Thank you very much again, staff. I think you folks have, nitpicking aside, I think you folks have done a great job on this. I'm very delighted with the direction this is going, and try to get this tied up next week or next month. There we go. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Item 6.2, election of the vice chair. I understand we've lost a member, sadly, so we need to choose a new vice chair. I think the process is just people get nominated or nominate themselves, and off we go.
Yeah. Member Shrestha is back. Thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you very much. Any volunteers for vice chair? I will say there's about 5 meetings left in the year, and I'm not expecting to miss any. So this might be the easiest step up you've ever had.
Okay, so if nobody else is going to do it, I will do it.
All right.
And Todd, you better be here for the next.
Yeah, I don't have any plans. All right, so I guess we need a motion. Do we move to select member Hans Romero?
Yep.
I would move committee member Hanson Romero become our vice chair.
I'll second that. Oh, member Shrestha seconded?
Yes.
Or did member
second.
Carlton? I didn't. Both at once. Who seconds?
I wrote down member Shrestha, so let's do that.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Very good. Let's have a vote then.
Okay. Committee member Carlton?
Approve.
Committee Member Hanson Romero,
Aye.
Committee Member Moss,
Yes.
Committee Member Shrestha,
Yes.
and Chair Abbott.
Yes, very good.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm feeling a cough coming on. I think I'm going to miss next one. All right. Subcommittee reports. We do have a report. Do we want to do this without?
Yeah, we should probably
Not
push
really.
it back unless
Okay.
Member Hanson Romero, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really ready, honestly, because I'm just moving back into my house after 5 months of being in a hotel. So I'm still, and I've got my son graduating tomorrow. So my focus has not been on the conversation as far as that is concerned. And also Peter is not in here as an attendee. So I hoping that he would be able to join us for this discussion as well from the Arts Committee.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. No, I think that's prudent. I think any other subcommittee reports? I'm hoping, Member Hanson, now that you are a little more stable, we can start picking up some of this other subcommittee work. You and our names appear a couple times at least. All right. Any other reports we want to make? Yeah.
Oh, you know what
yes.
I remembered that the subcommittee of Member Moss, we were talking about just dissolving that one because basically what Member Moss can do, anyone can kind of do as an individual. So talked about just dissolving that one. And then if any member wants to take part in communicating with other committees or advisory bodies, they can.
So why did we not do that? Did it need to be on the agenda or something?
I think we wanted to just have, because it was a vote to approve, we wanted to kind of have a vote to dissolve just to kind of let it be an official thing that is reflected in the minutes.
And we can do that, but does it need to be agendized? Can we just do that in this right now? Can we do that right now, or do we need to?
I ran the concept by the city clerk, and she thought that was fine to just do it now.
All right. Member Mosh, you're still okay with that?
Absolutely.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that I dissolve myself on the committee.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Let's have a vote on that.
Okay. Committee Member Carlton?
Approve.
Committee Member Hanson Romero?
Approved.
Committee Member Moss?
Yes.
Committee Member Shrestha?
Yes.
And Chair Abbott?
Yes. Thank you for your service, Pete.
And then one thing I also just wanted to mention too is committee or former member Petrilli was on a few of these subcommittees, so there are some openings. So if anyone's interested in joining a different subcommittee that member Petrilli was on, there is a possibility to do that. Yep.
Look, Pete, got a chance. There's an opening for other stuff.
Yeah. No, I'd be happy to serve on the subcommittee. But,
I understand a big hole just opened up in Pete's calendar now.
And also too, to mention, committee members stress that too. There's now some openings for you if you want to consider any. Not right now. This is just for the future.
Yeah, we don't do it right now.
No pressure. Yeah.
Feel free to look at the subcommittee list here. Feel free to contact a member of that subcommittee and just ask for information. We'd be happy to help you out if you're curious. It's a great way to get involved and learn a little bit more about a topic.
Yes, exactly. I'll be looking into all those. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, closing that item. Future agenda items. Clearly, we've discussed one at least. Any other requests or suggestions? I was curious about the survey. Did we send you the information for the survey?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
When you do, I'm happy to assist in distribution.
Pretty sure it's ready now. I guess this would go under a subcommittee report. Actually, pretty sure that's ready. I think we've looked it over and are ready to send it in. Okay. Not seeing any other future items suggested. I think we can note that the next meeting is Thursday, July 7th, and we can adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.